Brother Mahmoud, you ready?
I'm ready.
Bismillah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها وسر المستودع فيها بعدد ما أحاط به علمك. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع لها كل شيء وذل لها كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء وبعظمتك التي ملعت كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء وبوجهك الباغي بعد فناء كل شيء وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحت كل اسم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعم. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء. اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتغرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفئ بك إلى نفسك وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من غربك وأن توزعني شكرك وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤالا خاضع متذلذل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حوجته وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا ولا لقبائحي ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت ظلمت نفسي وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي فمنك علي اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترت وكم من فاضح من البلاء غلت وكم من إثار بغيت وكم من مكروه دفعت وكم من ثناء جميل لست أحلا له نشرت اللهم عظم بلائي وأفرت بي سوء حولي وقصرت بي أعمالي وقعدت بي أغلالي وحبسني عن نفعي بعد أملي وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها ومثالي يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري ولا تعوجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي وكثرة شهواتي وغفلتي فكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا وعلي وفي جميع الأمور عطوفا إلهي وربي من لي غيره أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري إلهي ومولاي أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي ولم أحترس فيه من تزعين عدوي فغرني بما أهوى فأسعده على ذلك القضاء فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعض حدودك وخالفت بعض أوامرك فلك الحمد علي في جميع ذلك فلا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه غضاك وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي مؤتذرا نادما منكسرا مستغيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة رحمتك اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ذري وفكني من شد بثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي يوما بدع خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي. حبني لابتداء كرمك وسولف برك بي. يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك مؤدبي بنورك بعد توحيدك وبعد من تبع عليه قلبي من معرفتك ولهج به لصومي من ذكرك واعتقده ضميري من حبك فبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيت أو تبعد من أدنيت أو تشرد من أوبيت أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك مودعا وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلوهيتك محققا وعلى ضمائر هبت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة وعلى جبارها سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طاوية وأشرت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب، يا كريم يا رب. فأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثو يسير بقاؤه أسير مدته. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أحده لأنه لو يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك فهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي فكيف لي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الغير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما منها أضج وأبكي العليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء بمدته فلئن سيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين ولأنودينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين يا غاية آمال العارفين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا غياث المستغيثين يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين فيا إله العالمين أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك أسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذوق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وخبز بين أتباعها بجرمه وجريرته فهو يضج إليك ضجيج معمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي فكيف يبغى في العذاب فهو يرجو موصلف من حلمك أم كيف تؤلمه النار فهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك أم كيف يفرقه لحيبها فأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها فأنت تعلم ضعفه أم كيف يتغلغل بين أطباقها فأنت تعلم صدقه أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها فهو يناديك يا رب أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك فباليقين أقتأ لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جوهديك وقضيت به من إخلاص معانديك لجعلت النور كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماؤك، أقسمت أن تملأه من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، فأن تخلد فيها الموندين، وأنت جل ثناؤك. قلت مبتدئا وتتبلت بالأنعام متكرما، أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي هتمتها وحكمتها فغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته، وكل ذنب أذنبته، وكل قبيح أسررته، وكل جهل عملته، كتمته أو أعلنته، أخفيته أو أظهرته، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكونوا مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جواري، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم، الشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر هذي من كل خير أنزلت، أو إحسان فضلت، أو بر نشرت، أو رزق بسطت، أو ذنب تغفر، أو خطأ تستر. يا رب 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 يا رب. يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومولك ربي، يوما بيده نوصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب. أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي من الليل والنهار بذكرك مأمورا، وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها بردا واحدا، فهولي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يوما عليه مؤبلي، يوما إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا رب 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 يا رب. قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في البارزين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأذنب منك ذنوب المخلصين وأخوفك مخوفة الموقنين وأجتمع في جبورك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد فمن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نسيبا عندك فأقربهم منزلة منك فأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك واعتف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا وقلبي بحبك متيما فمنا علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني أثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك غضيت على عبادك بإبادتك وأمرتهم بدعائك وضمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا رب نسبت وجهي وإليك يا رب مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي فبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا يا سريع الرضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته غنى ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغ النعم يا دافع النغم يا نور المستفحشين في الظلم يا عالما لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وافعل بما أنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا وصلى الله على محمد وآل محمد. صلوات. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all the mu'mineen and mu'minat that passed away. اللهم صل على
محمد وآل محمد. Jazakallah, Brother Mahmoud, for the beautiful recitation. May Allah accept your efforts. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you, Brother Mahmoud, as well. It was good to hear your voice after a while, and your voice brings back, I'm sure, memories for a lot of the brothers and sisters. And before I begin, there's a humble request from a sister in distress. We've spoken about them before and asked for du'as before as well. That Brother Muhammad Raza Jawad, father of Sister Farhana, has been in the ICU for the last 2 weeks, and she is requesting dua sihat. So before we begin, inshallah, after this Dua Kumayl recitation, let us recite the ayah Karima 5 times. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ 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 أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ. May Allah give sihah and salamati to this brother and all of those who might be suffering and ailing from this virus or any other illness, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الخطبة التاسعة والعشرون, khutbah number 29. We finished a couple sessions ago, and the last session we began speaking a little bit about the history of an individual by the name of Dahhak ibn Qais. Dahhak ibn Qais, the one who the khutbah number 29 is revolving around. And according to As-Sayyid al-Radi, here's the reason why this khutbah, this sermon was delivered by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Dahhak, as I mentioned in our last session, had attacked different parts of the Muslim lands under the rule of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and was causing problems and taking people's lives and looting people's homes and so on and so forth. And so Ali ibn Abi Talib, once he hears of this, he delivers this sermon. Now the main thing that Sayyid al-Radi he mentions is that this is when Dahhak ibn Qais had murdered a caravan, the caravan of the nephew of Abdullah bin Mas'ud, a caravan of Hajj. And so this is the khutbah that was delivered by Amir al-Mu'mineen according to him. Okay, so now we were speaking about this Dahhak ibn Qais, talked about him during the time of the different khulafa, talked about him before Siffin, during Siffin, around the time of the Battle of Nahrawan, and that's where he attacked that Hajj caravan as well, in addition to others that he killed with his army, and with the hit and run strategy that him and others were implementing for Muawiyah. We spoke about him after Imam Ali's martyrdom. We spoke about him during Yazid's successorship, Yazid, son of Muawiyah. And so we reached the point where Muawiyah dies and Yazid is made Khalifa. And how in that time between Muawiyah's death and Yazid's Khilafah, there is a time period where Yazid isn't in town. And so Dahhak, this shows how high a status he had in the eyes of the Umayyads and in the eyes of Muawiyah and Yazid, that he's in charge of the Khilafah, you can say, until Yazid comes back and assumes the power eventually. And we've all heard the story from there, how Yazid, he just starts messing up from there. In those 3 or 4 years that he was Khalifa, the huge tragedies that he brought upon the Muslim Ummah, right? So, as I said last time, Yazid, they don't know much about what involvement this Dahhak had during the time of Yazid. But then we reach a point where Yazid dies, and he died at a young age. And there's a story of how he died. We don't want to get into that right now. But when he dies, his son Muawiyah, who they refer to as Muawiyah II, he assumes Khilafah. So we want to talk about that a little bit. And when Muawiyah II takes Khilafah, they say he was a weak guy, weak even physically speaking. Physically speaking, he was weak, he was ill. And in addition to all these problems, he's just a guy that's just not interested in being Khalifa. Now, what the reason for this is, usually you'll get the feeling that the reason why he was not interested in Khilafah was because he felt that this doesn't belong to him, and just all in all to the Umayyads, even his grandfather Muawiyah, his father Yazid, and so on. This is based on some reports that we have. Not all of the reports mention him being upset with Muawiyah and Yazid, but all in all, what you get out of all of the reports is that, yeah, he just was not interested, number one. And number two, he had a sense of responsibility as well. He felt like this is something that belongs to a certain group of people, not necessarily the Ahlul Bayt. I didn't come across anything that would suggest that, but I'm not going to also say that I had an extensive research into this. But the 3, 4, 5 reports that, for example, Ayatollah Yusufi Gharawi brings in his Mawsu'atul Tarikh, you don't find anything there really that suggests that he felt that it belongs to Ahlul Bayt. What you do feel, or what you do see, is that this person is kind of on his deathbed, and they want him to choose somebody instead of himself and to succeed him. And so he says, I'm not interested, because why? As I said, he has that sense of responsibility. He's like, this is something that you all have to choose. I'm not going to choose someone hastily and make a mistake in this, and then I'm going to have to bear the punishment in the akhirah for it, right? Yeah, I don't have the Arabic in front of me, or else I would read it to you. He says, I don't want that responsibility. He says, I don't want to ataqallad. I don't want the onus and responsibility to be on me when it comes to choosing. So you all choose amongst yourselves. And there are some details, once again, in regards to this, but we're not covering the history of the Umayyads post Yazid right now. That's why I'm not getting into some of these details. Yeah, so he says, you guys choose from amongst yourselves. This is the important part, is that the Haq, while he's alive, Muawiyah II is alive. So we're talking about Muawiyah, son of Yazid, son of Muawiyah, son of Abu Sufyan. When he's sick and ill, and maybe even on his deathbed, he's asking the Haq to lead the people in prayer. Once again, so this shows how great the Haq is. Someone that we've probably never heard of, as Shia. But this is a very important individual. And he also asks the Haq to pray with the people after his death until they choose a ruler from amongst themselves. So this is during the death of Muawiyah II. Okay, now when Muawiyah dies, which they say it's a suspicious death because he was only 22. Some reports say he was stabbed, yeah, but not all of the reports say that. Anyway, it's a suspicious death. Think about it. Banu Umayyah, right, have been keeping their claws in this khilafah and keeping it to themselves and not letting it go out. And so now you have a young guy who is now Khalifa. Why? Because he just happens to be the son of Yazid, son of Muawiyah, who's not interested in being Khalifa and is talking bad about Khilafah and so on, to the point that his mother kind of denounces him and disassociates herself from him, kind of, and says some bad things to him, and he says some bad things to her in return. And so, not that he disrespects her, but speaks bad about the Khilafah to her as well. And she says, I wish I was such and such. She says something bad there, and I would never see such a day, of you speaking so ill of Khilafah and not caring about Khilafah. And he says, and I wish I was the same thing you just said, but I didn't have to go through what I'm going through, or having to choose a successor, or having to take the responsibility and burden of choosing someone, and so on. So think about it, brothers and sisters. You have the Banu Umayyah on one hand, who for them everything really is khilafah, is power, is the wealth, and all of that. And then you have someone who is not interested in it, but everything is in his hands. He's gonna cause major trouble for Banu Umayyah, right? He's that one ugly duckling, so to speak, that no one else is interested in. And they might get rid of him. And so it's not unlikely that this suspicious death of his happened deliberately through certain plots. Yeah. So some reports, not too many, the ones that I saw, out of them, one of them said, Tu'ina, he was stabbed and he's on his deathbed. But the other ones didn't really mention anything, the ones that I looked at. All right. So anyway, his death was, at the end of the day, something that was not, normal, because he died at the age of 22. So now when when he is like this, the governors of Banu Umayyah across the Muslim lands might not endorse him too much. So for example, you'll find that that Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, la'natullahi alayh, he didn't endorse Muawiyah II once he became Khalifa after Yazid's death. So what did he do? What did Ubaidullah do in Kufa? What he did was, in Basra actually, because after that he went back to Basra after Karbala and stuff like, and the stuff that happened, he went back to Basra and was the governor of Basra. What he did was he didn't endorse Muawiyah II, and things happened, and so eventually he's gathering bay'ah for himself, kind of. People are giving him bay'ah, and he's not against it either. He doesn't have a problem with that. And so he also asks the Kufans to do the same, yeah. So he's getting bay'ah for himself, and maybe other governors aren't really endorsing Muawiyah II. It was hard enough to sell Yazid to the people, let alone Muawiyah II, son of Yazid, who he himself doesn't even care about this. So eventually this Muawiyah II, when he dies, they want to do the janazah prayer over him. Yes. And so you have Walid bin Utbah, who comes to pray over him. Walid bin Utbah, he is the governor. He was the governor of Medina during the time of Yazid, and he's the one who summoned Imam Hussein alayhi salam and asked him for bay'ah in Medina. So this Walid bin Utbah has ended up in Sham in those days, and he wants to pray the janazah prayer. Here also we have a few reports. I noticed that this part of the history is a little unclear, and not very clear cut. So there are different reports. One report says he did the second takbir of Salat al-Janazah over Muawiyah II. And in parentheses, some might say that the reason why he wanted to pray Janazah over Muawiyah II was because then people will see him as the successor of Muawiyah II. Others will say otherwise. Anyway, it says that he said the second takbir and someone stabbed him and he died. He didn't finish the Janazah prayer. Others say, no, he just died from an illness in the middle of that salat. Okay, well, whatever the story is, whatever the truth and reality is, which we probably won't ever know, this person did not end up finishing Salat al-Janazah, and he might have ended up being Khalifa, but that didn't happen. So then what happens? Uthman bin Utbah, the brother of this Walid bin Utbah, he prays the Janazah prayer. Uthman bin Utbah bin Abi Sufyan. So these are proper Bani Umayyah people from the tribe of Bani Umayyah. So the people, after he's done with his salat, I don't know, are the people simple, naive? What is it? How do they see things? Anyone who prays janazah prayer should be seen as Khalifa? I don't know. I don't get it. A person who prays over a Khalifa is to be the next Khalifa. Maybe this is a sunnah that was established through previous Khulafa. Anyway, sunnah meaning it's something that was happening, and so people have that mindset of, okay, if there is somebody who prays over the Khalifa, he's probably the next Khalifa. Anyway, they ask him, are you the next Khalifa? Should we give you bay'ah? And he says, yeah, Bismillah, go ahead, but I'm not interested in fighting or wars or anything. So if you're going to give me bay'ah, I'll take your bay'ah with this condition. And so they're not interested to give him bay'ah. I guess the Banu Umayyah know that to maintain power, there will be some bloodshed, there will be some dhulm out there, and so you have to give in to that. And he's not interested in that. Now, is it because is he not interested in it because of the dhulm aspect, Or is it just that he's not interested in it because he feels like his own life might be endangered, or so on and so on and so forth? He's too lazy to do it. Whatever the reason is, I didn't see him explaining why. He just put this condition there. And so the people were not interested to give him bay'ah. But now in this time that Muawiyah II is dead, and these things are happening, and they're trying to find who the next Khalifa is and nominate the next Khalifa, who is taking care of affairs again? Who is that temporary um, Khalifa, kind of, so to speak, if you can call him Khalifa? It is the Haq ibn Qais again. Wow, what a confidant of the Umayyads. He himself, when you look at his lineage, he's not of the Bani Umayyah. He is of the Quraysh, but he's not a Banu Umayyah, and yet he has established himself. Just like, we have with Salman al-Farsi, he, of course, his lineage doesn't go back to Banu Hashim, yet famously the Holy Prophet ﷺ has said, Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt, that he's one of us ahl al-bayt. People like the Haq, they, through their evil, have reached the point where they are of the Banu Umayyah, even though they don't have that lineage, right? Kind of reminds you of Ziyad bin Abi, who also was taken in by Muawiyah and was announced as Muawiyah's brother, which that itself has its own story that we can't get into right now. Ziyad, they don't know who his father exactly was. There's a story of Abu Sufyan and Ziyad's mother, and so some were, some, or not some, it was, famously known that Ziyad's father is unknown, but then, miraculously, during the time of Muawiyah's Khilafah, Ziyad is taken in as Muawiyah's own brother, and so all of a sudden he is part of Banu Umayyah kind of now, although he wasn't before. Anyway, you can, through good and evil, associate yourself with the good and the evil ones, okay? Or be associated with them. Okay, so during this time, the Haq, he's in charge. This shows how important he is again. But we have a little insy-wincy problem here. And that is that the Haq, it seems that he was a smart guy. He notices something, it seems. And this is my analysis. I've not read this anywhere, although I haven't extensively done reading into this either. But I have a little guess here, because they, when you read about it, you find different, reports. Different historians might say that the Haq here, he secretly had inclination towards the Al-Zubayr, and more specifically, and namely, Abdullah ibn Zubayr. What's going on here? As some of you probably know, while all of this is happening in Sham, Muawiyah II, Yazid, they die, both of them young. Yeah. Well, all of this is happening. There's still a contender to the throne, so to speak, by the name of Abdullah bin Zubayr, who has been in Mecca for all this time. Yes, it all began when Imam Hussein alayhi salam was summoned in Medina to the castle of the governor, Walid bin Utbah, that we just talked about. And so when this happens, Abdullah bin Zubayr finds out that they are gathering bay'ah for Yazid. He flees Medina to Mecca and stays there. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when he leaves Medina for Mecca, he visits or meets up with Abdullah bin Zubayr and continues his journey to Karbala. Abdullah bin Zubayr stays there, and Imam Hussein tells him, yes, my grandfather, the Holy Prophet ﷺ, said there will be somebody who will compromise the sanctity of the Kaaba. I don't want to be that person. Abdullah bin Zubayr eventually turned out to be that person. He stayed in Mecca till the end. Yeah. So we have to remember now, while we're talking about the Banu Umayyah in Sham, and this vacuum all of a sudden that has been created with the death of Yazid and Muawiyah II, there is a major contender and heavyweight. All right, this person has a whole background in history in Islam. Abdullah bin Zubayr. He's seen as a Sahabi, the son of the grand Sahabi Zubayr. And he, he has a whole report card, of course, in the Shi'i school of thought's eyes, a very dark report card, but he was in the battle at Jamal, on the side of the Basriyun, the people of Basra, and Zubair and Talha and Aisha, fighting against Imam Ali and so on. Anyway, so you have this major contender to the throne, Abdullah bin Zubair in Mecca. And he is pretty solid, brothers and sisters, because there is no Imam Hussein anymore. There's no Imam Hassan. There's no Imam Hussein. There's no Muawiyah the first. There's no Yazid even. There's like nobody left to compete with this guy. And so I personally feel, if we want to get a little analytical, I personally feel that this Dahak is a smart guy. He notices the vacuum, that the Banu Umayyah really don't have anyone left. Who else is left? Muawiyah II's brother Khalid, for example. Khalid bin Yazid, who's a nobody, okay? Too young, he's really young. If Muawiyah II was 22 years old, I wonder how old he was, how old Khalid was. So he's young. Who else is left? A person by the name of Amr bin Sa'id bin al-As, okay? Also young. So you will have Marwan, who might be in Medina at the time. You have Abdullah bin Zubayr, the heavyweight in Mecca, and already who has a following, right? And that's it. And in Sham, there's a vacuum. Dahak understands this. Now, maybe he's doing this out of self-interest. Maybe he's doing this because he feels it's better for the Muslim nation. I don't know. But at the end of the day, he sees it fit to be on the side of Abdullah bin Zubayr after Muawiyah II dies. Okay? And so this Dahak, although he's there in Sham, he is hiding this inclination that he has. Now, some even might say that he was secretly gathering bay'ah for Abdullah bin Zubayr even in Sham. Okay. So Ibn Zubayr, this Abdullah bin Zubayr, he's gaining this major support in Hijaz, meaning Mecca, Medina, those places. Even in Iraq, he has supporters. And now in Sham, he has Dahak, okay? And so he has gained so much momentum, Abdullah bin Zubayr, that it's very interesting. Marwan, who those of you who know Marwan is very, very problematic, okay? This person, who later on became Khalifatul Muslimin, but before that, he even notices that, look, there is no fighting Abdullah bin Zubayr, trying to like gain more bay'ah than him. This guy is really on a roll, and so let me go give bay'ah to him as well. Marwan bin al-Hakam. And so he's going from Medina to go and give his bay'ah to who? To Abdullah bin Zubayr. Now, what happens is Ubaidullah bin Ziyad, and I'm doubting right now, was Marwan going from Medina or was he going from Sham? This is my doubt right now, it just came to mind. But wherever he was, he heads towards Mecca so that he can give his bay'ah to who? To Abdullah bin Zubayr. All right, so I want you to pay attention. We have like 2 or 3 characters right now we're talking about. Marwan, Abdullah bin Zubayr, and Ubaidullah bin Ziyad. Ubaidullah bin Ziyad goes and meets up with Marwan, who is going to give bay'ah to Abdullah bin Zubayr. Ubaidullah meets up with Marwan and convinces him, yo, what are you doing? Go to Sham and I will come there too and I will support you and I will gather bay'ah for you, and my bay'ah is for you as well, Marwan. You are Khalifatul Muslimin. Yeah, who is this Abdullah bin Zubayr? Right? And so Marwan is convinced, and Marwan takes a detour and goes to Sham, and Ubaidullah goes there. Now, Ubaidullah, he also meets up with Dahak. Remember, Dahak has that inclination towards Abdullah bin Zubayr right now. And he knows, Ubaidullah knows that Dhahak wants to support Ubaidullah. He goes and he tries to convince him. And some say that he does convince Dhahak that, look, who is this Abdullah bin Zubayr you're trying to gather bay'ah for? Yeah? You don't need to gather bay'ah for him. You yourself are an important person, and Dhahak was an important person. And so Dhahak, he starts gathering bay'ah for himself from the supporters of Abdullah bin Zubayr that were in Sham. And here his supporters get upset at him to the point where he has to apologize and go back to gathering bay'ah for Abdullah bin Zubayr. Okay? All right, so that I want you to keep that in mind as well. And I know it's getting a little complicated here. There are different variables in this whole story. And there are different characters, and that's why I'm explaining it a little slower so that we can follow. But all in all, we're just talking about Dhahak here, right? And how important he was in all of this. All right. So now, let's go back to the Banu Umayyah in Sham. They are scrambling to find a successor to Muawiyah II. There is a vacuum. And so they're worried. They're telling each other, they're like, rulership has been with us, the people of Sham, the Banu Umayyah. Are we going to let it transfer to Hijaz and to Abdullah bin Zubayr? We'll never allow that. Okay, so they say, let's get together because we have enough disunity amongst ourselves. We need to figure this out. So they get together in a place called Jabiyah. In Jabiyah, they get together. Jabiyah is on the outskirts of Damascus. And so the reason why they do this apparently is because they have become so weak versus Dhahak, and Dhahak now is kind of, openly supporting Abdullah bin Zubayr in Damascus. And so he's the one who's ruling there kind of now. And he's uncontested. And so they go to Jabiyah. Now, they go to Jabiyah to have a little council, a little saqifa of their own, so to speak, to choose the next Khalifa, right? Dhahak was actually going to go with them. But that's where he now makes it clear that I'm a supporter of Ibn Zubayr, and he goes back to Damascus and does not accompany them to Jabiyah. Okay, here, brothers and sisters, this history is very unstable, the reports, and sometimes the timeline isn't very clear. That's why I keep going back and forth to just try to clarify as much as I can, or else the reports are a little conflicting here. And those who want, they can refer to there's different history. I'm just trying to go as much as I can off of Mawsu'atul Tarikh of Ayatollah Yusufi al-Gharawi. But yeah, there are other timelines out there too, kind of. They're a little unclear, but I'm trying to make it as smooth as I can, inshallah. All right. So as they're all going to Jabiyah, this person, Dhahak, turns back and goes to Damascus. And he makes his support for Ibn Zubayr, all of a sudden, he makes it public. Someone that was a Zubayri sympathizer convinces him to go back and do this, and he does. All right. So this Bani Umayyah that are in Jabiyah now, they discuss amongst themselves who to choose. Now, some want maybe Khalid bin Yazid, but he's way too young. He might not even have reached his 20s yet. Some might want Amr bin Sa'id bin al-As. That guy's small and young too. What is the conclusion of this little council that they have? There's a lot of, there are at least, I don't know, 3 maybe or 4 extensive, you can say detailed reports here. But all in all, these are some of the things that you find in the reports. How Marwan bin al-Hakam is eventually chosen because of certain merits that he has and certain things that people say about him. I'm just going to read 2 here for you, 2 different ones. One person, according to one report, said because he's the elder of Quraysh, the sheikh of Quraysh, the one with the most intellect and merits and deen and religiosity. So that is what makes Marwan, the one who we believe was expelled from Medina alongside his father by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All of a sudden he has such a rank. Another one says, because he was the Shaykh of Quraysh, the one who avenged the blood of Uthman, and the one who fought Ali in Jamal and Siffin. Wow, these are merits now. Subhanallah. Well, they are a measuring stick for the ones who are in Sham for sure. So don't be surprised. It is no surprise. All right. So as I said, so the conclusion is Marwan is our Khalifa, and the one to succeed him will be Khalid bin Yazid, the son of Yazid and the brother of Muawiyah II. And the one to succeed Khalid bin Yazid is going to be Amr bin Sa'id bin Al-As. So they have these three names lined up. Everyone is happy. We are united now, which is pretty cool. I mean, props to them. And this shows how important unity is, because once they're united, they actually take over again, although the Haq was in power in Sham. And we'll get to that part. So anyway, they go back to Damascus and begin to take bay'ah, or they want to make their way back to Damascus, excuse me. Marwan bin Hakam and the rest. What does the Haq do now? The Haq, who is now has power in Sham, in Damascus. You see, it's hanging by a thread, brothers and sisters, for the Banu Umayyah. Everything's hanging by a thread. They're out of the city. They've made a decision. They don't even have as many people as the Haq does. The Haq is now in charge, and so on. So, like, what happens here? It says the Marwanites, they made their way from Jabia towards Damascus to fight the Haq. So what does the Haq do? He writes for help to some of the governors that are, outside of Damascus, to help him. And so there are three people. Nu'man bin Bashir, which is a famous person. He is also one of the Sahaba of Rasulullah, although his report card is not good in the eyes of the Shi'i school. A person by the name of Zafar bin Harith is also another governor, and Na'il bin Qais, another governor. Okay? Now, these three who are governors, they send troops, they send help to the Haq. And everyone is situated now in a place called Marj Rahit, which is where Hujr bin Adi, that companion of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and Imam Hassan alayhi salam, is buried, that Muawiyah killed, and Muawiyah's henchmen killed. Anyway, this is where his army is, and this is where the armies meet. And the battle of Marj Rahit takes place. Yes, it takes place. Now look at the numbers, brothers and sisters. Look at the numbers. 13,000 on the side of Marwan bin Hakam. How many on the side of Dhahak ibn Qais? 60,000. That's like 4 or 5 times more than what the Marwanites had. Right? So this part of history usually, lots of us might have not heard of Dhahak ibn Qais, but look at how important things are here. Like, everything is hanging by a thread. Marwan is the Khalifa of the Banu Umayyah, who now wants to come back, reclaim Sham, and announce himself and proclaim himself as the Khalifatul Muslimin, and have something and an argument against Abdullah bin Zubayr, who right now is the Khalifatul Muslimin, because he is really uncontested in a sense. The Banu Umayyah didn't have a Khalifa. Everything is hanging by a thread. And so what do? This is where the trickery of the likes of Marwan shows itself. According to, once again, Mawsu'at al-Tarikh and the accounts that he's chosen from the first-hand historical sources that are out there, of course, this is his selection. He says that Marwan says, no problem. When they're fighting, what we're going to do is we're going to call for a ceasefire, and we're going to send our representatives to go and quote-unquote negotiate or speak with the Haq. And when we do that, I want you to be ready to attack when they put their arms down. And that's exactly what happens. And so what happens is when they agree to the ceasefire, the troops of Marwan attack. Now, how this ambush took place, I don't know. I couldn't find details on it. But all in all, they ambushed them. And what happens is important people get killed. Some of Banu Qais, the tribe of Dahak ibn Qais, they get killed. 3 sons of one of those main people that helped Dahak by the name of Zafar bin Harith that I mentioned. 3 of his sons get killed. And worst of all, Dahak ibn Qais himself gets killed. So of course, when that person gets killed, the army is no more. And so the rest flee. And so it was hanging by a thread. Now all of a sudden the tables turn in favor of the Marwanites and the Banu Umayyah. And so they come into Damascus. Wow, just like that. It's crazy, brothers and sisters, because Ubaidullah bin Ziyad also, he took over while things were hanging by a thread for him when he came into Kufa. And he removed Nu'man bin Bashir, who was a softy in their eyes. When Muslim ibn Aqil was in Kufa gathering the bay'ah from the people for Imam Hussein, everything was in favor of Imam Hussein and Muslim ibn Aqil. But the tables all of a sudden turned when things were hanging by a thread, and Ubaidullah bin Ziyad came into Kufa. And he was about to maybe even get killed if he wasn't careful. But all of a sudden, with like 50 people that he had versus all the Kufans, he was able to figure it out. Through what? Of course, through betrayal, through threatening, through buying others off, and so on and so forth. Yeah. And here also deception, we have it. Marwan, according to this report, Marwan deceives Dahak. Eventually, Dahak is killed in this battle. And this is the fate of Dahak. And they make their way into Damascus. And now they, at least in Sham, they're uncontested for Khilafah. So Marwan bin Hakam now announces his Khilafah. I am Khalifatul Muslimin, which is, when you read these parts of history, brothers and sisters, you're just like, man, like this just proves that the Prophet ﷺ just could not have left this dunya without at least explaining a little bit who is to succeed him and how this successorship is going to work. How can the Prophet leave his people on their own so all of this craziness happens? Like, it would have just helped if the Holy Prophet ﷺ had given the guidelines for Khilafah, which we as the Shia believe he did. But things were censored, there was suppression, and eventually these things are happening now. It's very interesting. I think these are some of the strongest reasons when you just read up on the history after the Holy Prophet and after Karbala, especially after Muawiyah, during the time of Yazid onwards. You're just like, wow, like couldn't the Prophet he just have like mentioned what we're supposed to do? But he did, according to us, but it just was not followed. Yes, and this is where, of course, there is that major Shi'i-Sunni split where we speak about the Khilafah and who was to succeed the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anyway, so Dahak is killed, but there were others who had helped him. Yeah, and they are kind of like partners in this crime with Dahak. So, for example, Nu'man bin Bashir, he flees as well, and they come after him. Some people, it says qawmun, one of these tribes comes after him, or a group of people come after him and eventually get him. And this Sahabi of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, although I said his report card is not the brightest of report cards, if I'm not mistaken, in the Battle of Siffin, he was on the side of Muawiyah. So he was one of the few, like maybe you can say, more prominent Sahaba that you can name that were on the side of Muawiyah in Siffin. And the prominent Sahaba weren't too many compared to the ones that were on Imam Ali's side in Siffin. But anyway, if I remember correctly, he was on that side. Now, Nu'man bin Bashir, they eventually capture him, they kill him, they behead him, and they send his head to Marwan bin Hakam. So, this person's a traitor at the end of the day, in the eyes of Marwan, right? He sent troops to help the Haq. You were supposed to be one of the ones that's on our side. How dare you defect to the side of the Zubayrites, right? Another one of those people was Zafar bin Harith, right, who lost 3 of his sons when Marwan did what he did in the battle of Marj Rahit. Zafar is also, he flees and he seeks refuge in a fort of Qirqisa, I think the name is how you pronounce it. Anyway, he eventually, he was able to save himself, but they came after him too. Anyway, Marwan enters Damascus, Dahak is killed, and Marwan, now here the reports say he proposes to the mother of Khalid bin Yazid. Right? In other words, the wife and widow of Yazid bin Muawiyah. Now, it says, the Arabic says, liyaksirahu. Liyaksirahu means to break him. He wanted to break. So this is a suggestion that is made by Marwan's advisors, let's say, to break Khalid, because Khalid is a competitor at the end of the day. He was chosen as a successor, right, to Marwan, but at the end of the day, there were some who wanted him to be the Khalifa. And so here it says they did this so that they can break him. And so Marwan eventually does get married to the mother of Khalid bin Yazid. Now we have to understand, brothers and sisters, Marwan is very old here. In one of the reports, it says that even the hairs on his forearm had turned white. That's how old he had become, according to that one report, okay? And so he's very old. Why do I say this? Because he didn't live too long after. Now some say he died of an illness. Some say no, he died because he took a shot at Khalid bin Walid in a gathering once, and Khalid got upset. He took a shot at Khalid bin Yazid. Khalid bin Yazid got upset, complained to his mom. His mom said, silence, don't worry about it. And later on, because he was so old and feeble, she was able to suffocate him with a pillow, put it on his face and suffocated him, and he died because of that. Now, whichever one of these reports is stronger, whichever one is accepted by historians, but there are a couple of reports out there that say that he died. I think my guess is that the report of him dying of illness is going to be accepted more. That's just my guess. Anyway, so once again, because this is not the history of Marwan we want to talk about, or else I would have read up on that more to see what we have out there and what my personal humble maybe opinion is on it based on whatever is out there. Although I'm not a historian, but whatever I'm inclined towards, I would have shared. But I haven't looked into that because we are studying the history of Dahak ibn Qais and all of this. Okay, so that is a history of Dahak. Why did I go through all of this? So that we know who these people were, how significant and important they were, how pivotal they were to Banu Umayyah succeeding, the likes of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan succeeding in striking fear and terror into the hearts of the followers of Amir al-Mu'mineen in the Muslim lands when Amir al-Mu'mineen was Khalifatul Muslimin, alayhi salam. Yes? People like Dahak ibn Qais, people like Busr bin Abi Artah, people like Sufyan bin Auf al-Ghamidi that we talked about in khutbahs number 29, 27, and 25. These were the ones and the likes of them. There were many more who Amir al-Mu'mineen complained to the Kufans. He said, look, they are united on their batil and falsehood. We are disunited when we are on their straight path. And how much Imam Ali invoked these people to help him in those very, very sensitive, important, pivotal moments and times of the Islamic, of that history of Islam back then. Yet they didn't deliver, they didn't show up. And so things were lost to the likes of Dahak ibn Qais and the likes of Dahak ibn Qais. We seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from disunity over if we are on the haqq, and we also seek refuge in Allah from having an ill fate and an ill ending to our lives. And inshallah, through just following the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt day in and day out, we can avoid such fates. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. My salams to those of you who tuned in. Brother Farid, Sister Zainab, and Brother Khurshid says, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Please recite Surah Fatiha for Ayaz Khurasani, son of Abbas Khurasani. He was the younger brother of Afzal Khurasani, one of the founding members. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.